Today, we're going to explore the 15 poorest countries in the world and dive deep into the challenges they face. These countries are typically considered poor due to a mix of factors like low GDP per capita, high unemployment, reliance on agriculture, political instability, corruption, lack of education and healthcare, fast population growth, and vulnerability to natural disasters and climate change. Based on research from Global Finance Magazine, World Atlas, and World Facts, these combined factors play a significant role in making a country one of the poorest in the world. So let's get started and learn more about the incredible people despite their hardship in these nations. South Sudan. South Sudan may have a GDP per capita of $455, but it's in a tough spot as one of the poorest countries globally. Despite having lots of oil, the country is facing some serious economic and social issues. Ever since gaining independence from Sudan in 2011, South Sudan has been dealing with ongoing conflicts and political uncertainties that are holding back its progress. Different political parties and ethnic groups are clashing, resulting in violence, people being displaced, and disruptions in the economy. The country, blessed with oil but unfortunately plagued by the resource curse, is facing a variety of challenges such as inequality, social and political divisions, corruption, and a lack of economic diversity with a heavy reliance on one commodity. Many people rely on traditional agriculture and international humanitarian aid to get by. Unfortunately, droughts and floods often destroy crops, leaving nothing to grow, eat, or sell. And in South Sudan, there's not a lot of infrastructure to help people get around. There aren't many paved roads, and some places are hard to reach, especially when it's rainy. This makes it tough for folks to trade goods, get to markets, see a doctor, or go to school. Healthcare in South Sudan isn't great either. There aren't enough medical supplies or trained staff, so people don't always get the care they need. And when it comes to education, not many kids can go to school, and the quality of education isn't always the best. As per the United Nations, over 60% of the people are dealing with food insecurity, and many struggle to find clean water and proper sanitation. On top of that, the country often faces humanitarian crises like food shortages and insufficient access to safe water. Burundi. Burundi is one of the poorest countries globally, with a low GDP per capita of $916. Its economy is mainly based on agriculture, with over 80% of the population relying on subsistence farming. This makes the country quite sensitive to changes in the weather and fluctuations in global commodity prices. Burundi has faced political turmoil and conflict in its past, including a civil war from 1993 to 2005 and unrest during the 2015 presidential election. These events have sadly resulted in violence, displacement, and economic struggles for the people of Burundi. The economy is facing some challenges with its structure, like having a limited range of industries and not enough infrastructure. This is making it hard for businesses to grow and provide jobs. On top of that, there is a lot of public debt, and the country is importing more than it's exporting, which is not helping the economy to expand. Unfortunately, the social side of things isn't looking too great either. Many kids are dropping out of school, there aren't enough healthcare services, and too many mothers and children are dying. To make things worse, a lot of people are not getting enough to eat. Many people are struggling to find enough food to eat, and lots of families have been forced to leave their homes because of ongoing conflicts. The influx of returning refugees from neighboring countries strains the limited resources available. The country also struggles with not having enough roads and electricity, which is making it even harder for businesses to operate effectively and for people to get the help they need. Central African Republic. The Central African Republic is considered one of the poorest countries in the world, with a GDP per capita of only $1,123. Even though the country is abundant in resources like diamonds, gold, and uranium, ongoing conflicts, political unrest, and poor infrastructure have plunged CAR into severe poverty. Since gaining independence, the nation has faced numerous violent outbreaks and coups, including the devastating civil conflict in 2013, resulting in mass displacement and humanitarian emergencies. These conflicts are really slowing down economic development, causing problems with making things and trading them. The agricultural industry, which most people work in, is especially at risk. On top of that, there's a lot of corruption and bad leadership that's stopping the country from using its resources properly to grow. The signs of how well the society is doing are not looking good either. Lots of people can't read, healthcare isn't great, and people aren't living as long as they should. There aren't enough roads or electricity, which makes it hard to do business and get important services to people. The humanitarian situation is concerning, with many people relying on international assistance for necessities like food, water, and healthcare. Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Democratic Republic of the Congo may be rich in minerals like cobalt, copper, and diamonds, but it's still one of the poorest countries in the world. Despite its natural wealth, the DRC's GDP per capita is just $1,552. Why? Well, years of conflict, political instability, and corruption have kept economic prosperity out of reach for many Congolese. The country has faced ongoing violence and civil war, especially in the eastern regions, leading to displacement and humanitarian crises. Plus, poor infrastructure like bad roads and unreliable electricity makes it tough for industries to grow and for trade to flourish. The agricultural sector, a key source of income for many, struggles with underdevelopment and constant conflicts over land. The country's social indicators are some of the lowest worldwide, showing high levels of poverty, limited education, and scarce healthcare access. Basic services are a big challenge, leading to high child and maternal mortality rates and widespread malnutrition. Mozambique. Mozambique is one of the poorest countries in the world, with a GDP per capita of $1,649. Despite having valuable natural resources like aluminum and petroleum, the country faces many economic challenges. These include a history of civil war, ongoing political unrest, and frequent natural disasters. Mozambique's economy relies heavily on agriculture, but this sector is vulnerable to climate change impacts such as droughts and cyclones. Unfortunately, Mozambique's infrastructure is not well developed. Many people do not have access to essentials like electricity, clean water, and reliable transportation. This lack of infrastructure hinders economic growth and makes it difficult for people to access markets, healthcare, and education. Additionally, corruption is a major issue in Mozambique, which prevents the effective use of natural resources and public funds for development. In Mozambique, social indicators are unfortunately not great. There are high levels of poverty, illiteracy, and child and maternal mortality. The healthcare system doesn't have all the tools it needs to help with the country's health problems, and the education sector faces challenges like high dropout rates and not enough resources. To make things even tougher, Mozambique deals with a lot of natural disasters, like the destructive cyclones in 2019. These events have made it even harder for the country to bounce back from economic hardships, leading to widespread damage and humanitarian crises. Niger. Niger is considered one of the poorest countries in the world, with a GDP per capita of $1,675. The nation faces significant economic and social challenges, including extreme poverty, rapid population growth, and limited access to essential services. The majority of Niger's economy is based on agriculture, with many people relying on farming and livestock for their livelihoods. However, this heavy reliance on agriculture makes the country vulnerable to climate changes like droughts and desertification. With its rapid population growth, Niger struggles to provide sufficient resources and public services to its people. The country's infrastructure is underdeveloped, with poorly maintained roads, limited access to electricity, and inadequate water and sanitation facilities. This lack of infrastructure hampers economic growth and makes it difficult for people to access important services like healthcare and education. In Niger, social indicators rank among the lowest in the world. Sadly, there are high levels of illiteracy, child and maternal mortality, and malnutrition. The healthcare system is struggling with limited resources, leading to poor health outcomes. Education is also facing challenges, with low enrollment and high dropout rates, especially among girls. Adding to the difficulties are political instability and security issues, especially in areas affected by terrorist activities. This has caused displacement and disrupted economic activities, worsening the country's poverty. Malawi. Malawi, a country with a GDP per capita of $1,712, is sadly one of the poorest nations in the world, facing many tough economic and social challenges. The economy relies heavily on agriculture, with about 80% of the population working in subsistence farming. This heavy dependence on agriculture makes Malawi particularly vulnerable to climate changes and natural disasters like droughts and floods, which can have a big impact on food security and economic stability. The country also struggles with high population growth, putting a strain on limited resources and public services. Malawi's infrastructure is lacking, with inadequate road networks, limited access to electricity, and not enough water and sanitation facilities. This lack of infrastructure makes it harder for the country to grow economically and for people to access important services like healthcare and education. Social indicators in Malawi aren't looking great. Rates of poverty, illiteracy, and child and maternal mortality are high. The healthcare system is struggling with funding and providing the services people need, which isn't helping with health outcomes. And the education sector, it's also having a tough time, with high dropout rates and not enough resources, especially in rural areas, but it doesn't stop there. Malawi is also dealing with food insecurity and malnutrition. Many families don't have reliable access to nutritious food, which is causing health issues for kids, like stunting. And on top of all that, the economy is facing challenges too, with frequent economic shocks and a heavy reliance on foreign aid. Liberia is one of the poorest countries in the world, with a GDP per capita of $1,882. The country has faced many tough economic and social challenges. 2 civil wars from 1989 to 1996 and from 1999 to 2003 caused a lot of harm, including loss of life, displacement of people, and destruction of infrastructure. Even now, Liberia's economy relies heavily on agriculture, especially rubber and timber, as well as foreign aid. Unfortunately, Liberia is still struggling to recover from these difficult times. There are many infrastructure problems like bad roads, not enough electricity, and lack of proper water and sanitation systems. These issues make it hard for businesses to thrive, limit access to markets, and prevent people from getting necessary services like healthcare and education. On top of that, many people in Liberia, especially young people, are unemployed or can't find enough work, which makes poverty worse and stops the economy from growing. The social indicators in Liberia are concerning. The healthcare system is not well developed, resulting in high rates of maternal and child mortality, as well as widespread infectious diseases like malaria and tuberculosis. The Ebola outbreak that occurred between 2014 and 2016 had a devastating impact on Liberia, putting immense strain on an already fragile healthcare system and causing significant harm to the economy and social fabric of the country. The educational situation in Liberia is also challenging. High rates of students dropping out, subpar education quality, and insufficient school resources are common issues. Many children, especially those in rural areas, do not have access to basic education, which limits their future prospects and perpetuates a cycle of poverty. Improving education is vital to developing human capital, which is crucial for Liberia's long-term economic growth. Political instability and governance problems are also big factors in Liberia's economic struggles. Corruption and inefficiencies in government hold back progress and make it harder to use public money effectively. The recent elections are a step in the right direction, but there's still a lot of work to do to improve governance and move the country forward. Madagascar, a beautiful island nation in the Indian Ocean near Africa, is known for its incredible wildlife and stunning landscapes. Unfortunately, despite its natural beauty, the country faces significant economic challenges. Madagascar is one of the world's poorest nations with a per capita GDP of only $1,900. Agriculture is a major industry in Madagascar, providing jobs for many people. However, the country's reliance on agriculture makes it vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Cyclones, droughts, and unpredictable weather patterns can lead to crop failures and food shortages, contributing to poverty. Political instability is another issue that Madagascar has struggled with. Periods of unrest and challenges in governance have affected the country's economic stability and development efforts. Political transitions and civil unrest have occasionally disrupted social services and investment opportunities. Limited access to healthcare and education is a big issue in places like rural and remote areas of Madagascar where resources are scarce. This can lead to high infant mortality rates and low literacy levels, which are major challenges for the Malagasy people. The environment is also at risk in Madagascar, with deforestation and habitat loss endangering unique wildlife like lemurs and diverse plant life. This not only threatens species, but also impacts agriculture, tourism, and the economy as a whole. Infrastructure development is slow in keeping up with the needs of the growing population. This can hold back economic growth, limit access to important services, and create gaps between urban and rural areas. Despite these challenges, Madagascar remains a resilient and beautiful country with a rich culture and friendly people. With support and investment, the country has the potential to overcome its obstacles and thrive. Yemen. Yemen, with a GDP per capita of $2,240, is considered one of the poorest Arab countries. It's facing tough economic times worsened by its heavy reliance on diminishing revenues from oil and gas reserves. To make matters worse, the nation is caught in a complex civil war that began in 2014, leading to a severe humanitarian crisis characterized by increasing poverty, unemployment, and serious shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. Before the conflict, Yemen was already dealing with significant socioeconomic issues caused by years of mismanagement, corruption, and the depletion of natural resources like oil and water. This neglect left a large part of the population without access to basic services such as electricity, healthcare, and clean water. Nowadays, more than 70% of people in Yemen rely on humanitarian support just to get by. It really shows how serious the situation is. The fighting has led to lots of people having to leave their homes to find safety in things like food and water. Schools and hospitals have also been wrecked, making it even harder for Yemen to recover. The ongoing environmental destruction in Yemen, such as severe water scarcity and pollution, has worsened the humanitarian crisis and put a strain on already limited resources. Despite this, Yemen's rich cultural history, including its breathtaking cities like Sana'a, remains a stark reminder of the impact of years of conflict and neglect. Global efforts are still focused on providing humanitarian aid, negotiating for peace, and rebuilding Yemen's damaged infrastructure. To help Yemen recover and achieve stability, it's crucial for the international community to stay dedicated and work on addressing the root causes of the conflict, while also supporting the long-term development and resilience of its people. Somalia. Did you know that Somalia has a GDP per capita of around $2,062, but is facing some serious economic challenges? These challenges come from things like long-lasting conflicts, poor governance, and frequent droughts. Ever since Siad Barre's regime fell apart in 1991, Somalia has been dealing with civil war and political instability. There's also the issue of Al-Shabaab, a militant group controlling parts of the country. The government's having a tough time keeping things together outside of the capital city, Mogadishu. Some regions, like Somaliland and Puntland, are pretty much doing their own thing. On top of that, frequent droughts have been making things even harder by wiping out crops and livestock, which leads to a lack of food and lots of malnutrition. Somalia relies heavily on money sent home from people living abroad, but that's not really a sustainable way to keep the economy going. Plus, there's not much of an industrial or manufacturing sector since things have been unstable for so long and there's not much infrastructure in place. So basically, Somalia has its work cut out for it when it comes to getting back on its feet economically. International aid is working hard to address urgent needs and support lasting development projects in Somalia. Yet, it's tough to get the help where it's needed most because of safety worries. Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is facing economic struggles with a GDP per capita of approximately $2,189. This is largely due to the lasting effects of the civil war that occurred from 1991 to 2002, which caused widespread loss of life, displacement, and infrastructure damage. The country has been left in a fragile state, encountering significant challenges in rebuilding its economy and society. Adding to these difficulties, Sierra Leone was heavily impacted by the devastating Ebola epidemic from 2014 to 2016. This outbreak resulted in the loss of thousands of lives and further weakened the healthcare system. The epidemic not only strained the already fragile health infrastructure, but also disrupted economic activities, reduced agricultural production, and discouraged foreign investment. Sierra Leone has made strides in stabilizing and growing its economy, but it still faces challenges with poverty, unemployment, and corruption. The country relies heavily on the mining sector, especially diamonds, but struggles with fluctuating global prices and governance issues. There are also significant public health challenges, poor infrastructure, and limited access to education and basic services. Together, these challenges have placed a heavy burden on Sierra Leone, but the resilience and determination of its people continue to shine through as they work towards rebuilding and overcoming these obstacles. Chad. Despite its oil wealth, Chad faces economic challenges due to its GDP per capita of approximately $2,620. The country has a history of political turmoil, including coups and armed conflicts, which have hindered political stability and effective policy implementation. Authoritarian rule and governance issues have exacerbated the situation. In addition, the presence of armed groups and ongoing conflicts in the region, as well as spillover from neighboring countries, further aggravate the security situation. This instability deters investment and disrupts economic activities. Chad's infrastructure is lacking, with poor road networks, limited access to electricity, and inadequate water and sanitation facilities. The industry deals with problems like corruption, bad management, and changing global oil prices. Unfortunately, the benefits of oil money aren't spread out evenly, so many people don't see their lives get better. Places outside of the cities have lots of poverty and joblessness, with farming as the main way people make a living. There aren't many opportunities for work or good social services in Chad, making things even tougher. Chad has tough times with education and healthcare too. Lots of people can't read well, and there's not much help for staying healthy. Not being able to get good schooling or medical care slows down the growth of smart, healthy people in Chad. Thankfully, international aid stepped in to lend a hand in building up Chad's roads, hospitals, and schools. But sometimes problems with how the country runs and stays safe make it hard for the aid to work as well as it could. Solomon Islands. The Solomon Islands, with a GDP per capita of around $2,713, are facing some tough economic challenges. This is mainly because of their remote location in the South Pacific and their heavy reliance on just a few types of exports. Being far away from major global markets means it costs a lot to transport goods in and out of the islands, making trade more tricky and expensive. Plus, with so many islands making up the country, there are infrastructure issues like roads, ports, and airports that aren't up to scratch. This makes it hard for goods and services to move around the islands smoothly. The economy relies heavily on just a small number of exports like logging, fishing, and palm oil, but because they don't have a wide variety of things to sell, they're at risk of losing out if global prices or demand change suddenly. Relying too much on logging in the Solomon Islands has caused big problems like deforestation and harming the environment, putting biodiversity and sustainability at risk. Many people in rural areas are struggling with poverty and not having enough work, mainly because they rely on farming and fishing to survive. This lack of economic opportunities makes it tough for people to lift themselves out of poverty. Getting a good education and healthcare can be tough in the Solomon Islands. Not having many chances for education and not being able to access healthcare easily hold people back from reaching their full potential and living the best life they can. Fortunately, international aid from countries like Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, as well as organizations around the world, is helping the Solomon Islands with things like building infrastructure, improving healthcare and education, and making governance reforms. This support is vital for the country's future development and well-being. Mali. Mali is a country facing some tough challenges when it comes to its economy and society. With a GDP per capita of around $2,714, things aren't easy. The ongoing conflict in the northern regions and a heavy dependence on agriculture add to the issues Mali is dealing with. Since 2012, Mali has been going through a rough time with conflicts and instability in its northern areas. Different armed groups, including separatists and Islamist militants, are involved, making the security situation pretty dicey. Attacks on civilians, military personnel, and peacekeepers happen frequently. This conflict has led to many people being displaced, creating a humanitarian crisis. Lots of folks are now living in refugee camps or are internally displaced. This has made it tough for people to access basic services like healthcare, education, and food. The good news is that there are international efforts like the United Nations Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali, MINUSMA, and the G5 Sahel Joint Force working to bring stability to the region and fight terrorism. But achieving lasting peace and security is still a big challenge for Mali. Agriculture is super important in Mali's economy, providing jobs for about 70% of the workforce. They mainly focus on subsistence farming, growing crops like cotton, millet, rice, and sorghum. But Mali's agriculture faces challenges from climate change, like droughts and desertification, which can harm crop yields and food security. Since Mali relies so much on agriculture, any changes in output or global prices can have a big impact on the economy. Plus, poor infrastructure and limited market access hold back the potential for agricultural growth. Unfortunately, there are high levels of poverty and unemployment, especially in rural areas. People struggle to find work and access basic services, which keeps poverty widespread. Thankfully, international aid is a big help in Mali's development. Programs from the European Union, the United States, and other countries focus on security, infrastructure, health, and education to make a positive impact. We listed 15 countries in this video. If you'd like to see similar content, feel free to leave a comment below and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.